This is Charlie Parsons for the Stomping Ground, powered by Wow Hydrate and available on DAZN. Mr. Steve Bunce, thank you ever so much. The first time I've interviewed you on my platform.
Well, your new platform,
yes,
indeed.
Which is very exciting. How's things?
You know what, Charlie? We've had a unique 4 weeks. We're going to have 4 Saturdays. We're going to have 6 world title fights involving British boxers and a total of 8 boxers. It's never happened before. So we're making history. So when people say, oh, boxing's dead, we say, hold on a minute, how's it dead? If we're having more fights in 4 weeks than we had in any year in the first 5 of the 1970s, how's it dead? Do you know in the 1970s when people talk about this heyday for British boxing, do you know there were fewer than 300 licensed boxers? Now there's nearly 1,100. And it's like maths, really. If you have 11 shows a month and you used to have 3 shows a month, which one of those months is the most successful, Charlie? The one with 11. So when people tell me that the boxing was bigger in the 70s and the 80s, now what it means was the coverage was different. It was back page of national newspapers read by millions. The actual boxing business then, it was tiny, trust me. And I know, because I was part of it, for God's sake.
I suppose out of curiosity then, on that topic, things have come on so much. I suppose the introduction of YouTube media, the more broadcast media, obviously print's always been there as such, but it's certainly a developing game. What have you taken out of, I suppose, how the sport's moved over the last 20 years?
I'm one of those crazy dinosaurs that's been earning nearly 70% of his income from online business, and yet somehow I'm a dinosaur. I don't understand. I mean, I've had stuff on ESPN 2001 when it was basically a precursor of a YouTube channel. I've made whatever it is now, 2,000 pods or something stupid. So I'd like to think I've embraced this new regime, this new world, and it is what it is. This is the new world. This is where we are. This is how we get our publicity. This is how we generate our stories, and this is how we push and sell our fights. And some people dislike it, and not all aspects of it are good, because you know what? Not all aspects of the old print media in the 70s were good, to be honest with you. You know, people talk like everyone back then, the 15 guys that worked for newspapers, all got Pulitzer prizes. Half of them couldn't spell Pulitzer, let alone get the prize. So don't worry. There's good and there's bad all over our boxing media then and now.
Let's talk about this fight. You talk about great fights.
Which one? Well, how'd you start with?
The main event.
Well, okay. I thought you were talking about Fabio Wardley and Fraser Clarke.
Great fight.
Sky Nicholson against Raven Chapman. What a weekend.
Indeed. The main event is one of those fights that I suppose if it wasn't for everything that's going on here in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, we probably never would have seen. Yeah. 2 elite fighters, undisputed. It's a great clash of styles, right?
Listen, it's not just a great clash of styles, it's a clash of everything. It's a clash of kind of boxing cultures, and it's the sort of fight you mentioned there that we probably wouldn't have this fight if we didn't have Riyadh season and what Riyadh season brings to the table, which is the money to make the great fights happen. We wouldn't have it, and that would be a great loss, because this would be one of, in 10 years' time, if we hadn't had this fight, this would be in your top 3 fights that we missed. And actually, bizarrely, I include in that Pacquiao and Mayweather, because what we got wasn't Pacquiao and Mayweather. So I still feel we missed Pacquiao and Mayweather. We never got Riddick Bowe, Lennox Lewis for a variety of reasons. And we got Mike Tyson against Lennox Lewis 5 or 6 years too late. So even some of the fights we didn't get when we should have got them. This one we're getting, and some people might say, well, Beterbiev's 39. Say, you know what? He might be 39.
Still got 3 belts.
But he's still got 3 belts, and he's still unbelievable.
And he looked incredible against Callum Smith, by the way.
You know what? The Callum Smith fight, it's really interesting. You talk to people that really know Callum, that have seen Callum in the gym, and they thought this is going to be the test. This is going, this is the right time to get Beterbiev. But you know what, Charlie? We've been saying this is the right time to get Beterbiev for about 7 years.
Yeah.
Literally every time he fights. Yeah, and you'll be in that situation where if he gets beat when he's 44, well, and his 35th fight, we'll go, see, told you he was nothing.
I find this fight really interesting because you've got this master boxer in Dmitry Bivol, and I was just speaking to him there and I said, where did you learn this style? Because we sometimes look at that sort of Middle Asian and sort of Russian, Eastern European style of stuff. It's not necessarily like that. It's that little bit more fluid. He sort of adapted it to himself, and he says he can't even describe how he learned it. It's just something he's always been able to do. And you've got a spiteful puncher who can box very well himself, cuts off the ring viciously in Artur Beterbiev. How do you sort of see them going into the ring together? How do you expect it to play out in the early
I
rounds?
think there's a lot of smart boxing because they're both very capable. I mean, everything that Beterbiev does is measured, so he doesn't make mistakes. I think he'll be really smart, and I think Bivol will be really smart. And there's a good argument that the fight will be won by brains and not by power and not by engines. There's no danger about their engines fading, and there's no danger about them being questioned about their power. Those are established. I think this fight could be won by the smartest one, the cutest one. And a lot of people believe that Bivol's the smarter and the cuter fighter. Well, there's a solid argument that Beterbiev's the smarter and the cuter fighter. Some of the stuff he does, the way he blocks shots, some of the ability, I mean, just cutting down the ring doesn't quite capture what he does. You know, lots of fighters cut down the ring. You've only got to move your left foot out if you're an orthodox fighter, or your right foot out if you're a southpaw fighter, by 3 inches, and you've cut down the ring. You've stopped the escape route. He does something different, and he's always done something different. And he's really got a toe. You mentioned there, Charlie, about the sort of Russian, not Russian, Eastern European style. It's not as simple as that, because I believe Beterbiev, less so Bivol because he's a bit younger, but I believe Beterbiev's got a toe in both camps. So when Beterbiev at 17, 18, 20 odd years ago went into the national team, and they trained wherever they trained. I think they trained in Belarus. When he went into that, in Minsk in Belarus was the national headquarters. When he went into that team, he was being trained by old Soviet coaches who had developed the style in the 60s, who had made all the great Soviets of the 70s and the 80s. Whereas Bivol, when he went in, some of those guys were old, faded or dead, and he was trained by far more modern box, far more modern coaches. So Beterbiev, just like the Klitschko brothers, they came up in a regime that hadn't changed since the end of the Second World War. So they're very different beasts. And I think Artur might be the last man. He might be the last old Soviet boxer standing. Think about that.
I suppose just lastly on that fight as such, are you able to give us not a prediction as such, but do you have a guy that you sort of edge in the fight?
I was massively favouring Bivol with a little bit of movement and working on that theory. He's got to lose sometime, Beterbiev. And I've just this last 10 days or so, since we saw them in London a couple of weeks ago, and there's this day out here, and I'm just fancying Beterbiev a little bit more, just a tiny little bit more. But we're talking about a 49-51, yeah. And I just think he's massively fresh. Those long breaks between fights and the way he lives in his lifestyle, I think that it's not a case of turning back the clock. I just don't think he's had a clock to turn back. I think he's just he's a natural freak athlete.
It's annoying saying to you in a question, just quickly, but there's a couple of things I want to discuss in a small amount of time, and one of them being Fabio Wardley and Fraser Clarke. We see the rematch right in its own right. It could have done the O2 again. Yeah. There was talk about it being a pay-per-view headline. We're lucky to have it co-main event, we believe, on such a big bill here. Fabio said from round 13, but I think Fraser will learn a lot from the first fight and probably be a little bit more assertive on the jab and sort of stick and move as such, that amateur style. How do you see it?
Well, I think Fraser regrets not having had a harder fight going into that fight. So the big question is, and they probably both claimed that they did, the big question is who learnt more from the 12 rounds they had. Fraser will say he did, Fabio will say he did. I think possibly Fraser might have learnt a bit more, and Fraser's reasoning, sensible reasoning, saying that if I'd have had a fight like that before I had a fight like that, I would have won a fight like that, if you understand me. Not dissimilar to Anthony Yarde, when Anthony Yarde lost to Kovalev in Chelyabinsk. Okay, had Anthony Yarde had the Lyndon Arthur fight before he fought Kovalev, he might have beaten Kovalev, and that's just the way the business works. So I think it's a great fight. It could have topped the bill anywhere, but they're called prize fighters for a reason. The prize, is the money. And so they fight for money. So that's why this fight is here, and it's not up for dispute. That's why it might have been in Vegas. That's why it might have been like some of Bob Arum's shows in Macau off the coast of Hong Kong. That's why in the 80s, when there was all the illegal money in Atlantic City, fights were in Atlantic City. It's just the way economics, and it's just the way sports economics works. It's here because they're getting paid record astounding. I'm assuming, I haven't found out, but I'm assuming it's the highest purse ever shared by two men in a British title fight.
Oh, yeah, good
by some distance. Probably by some distance.
And the Joshua White purses probably would have been up there as well.
Well,
So.
but I wouldn't have thought. Joshua at that point would have been on his money that he was getting, and White wouldn't have been getting. I mean, they wouldn't. If they shared this, possibly. That's the only one that comes close. Some people told me that Dubois and Joyce would be close, and certainly David Adelaide and Fabio Wardley out here. The figure I heard for that was a good figure. So either this is number one, or someone might argue, well, AJ got more. I'm not sure AJ was getting as much as I'm hearing these guys are getting back then.
Buncey, out of curiosity, you did a great interview with AJ the second he came out of the dressing room. From sort of what you got out of him, I know it was very raw and initial, but we can take more from that than we can the press conference. What did you take out of him?
I took out of it that he had massive regrets for a massive lapse of concentration in the fifth. He wasn't bothered about the first 4 rounds. That can happen in a fight. You can get caught, you can get hurt, but he'd got himself together at the end of the fourth. He had a good minute in the corner. You heard some of the stuff that was being talked about, and you heard the way he was talking back. You know, he wasn't a groggy fighter. His head, I'd use the expression, had cleared, and I think going into the fifth, he was starting to find to actually find a bit of rhythm, and then got led, manoeuvred into a corner and not clean out by a stupid punch. So all he really talked about was he'd just watched the fight, you see, Charlie. So when he's talking to me, that's why he'd watched the finish. That's why he knew exactly what had happened. So if you watch it back and have the fight on your phone at the same time you're watching it back, watching the interview back and watching the fight back, he describes that punch perfect in real time. So he lands this, Dubois misses with this, he lands this, he goes to throw this, he gets caught. That's because he just watched the fight. What I took back was that instantly, if you want to know the honest truth, and we said this on the BBC pod, is that he wants another go and he believes he'll get it right next time.
Out of curiosity, look, boxing fans can be quite fickle. We've seen AJ written off many a time after the Ruiz defeat. People say he shouldn't have taken the rematch, and the same after both the Usyk fights. Once again, the noise is that he should retire, he should do this, he should do that, he shouldn't take the Dubois rematch. Is there a path to victory for Anthony Joshua in the rematch? Should that be, I suppose it's all up to him, but should that be the immediate next fight? I'm so scared of losing Fury AJ as a fan as well.
I think talking to Fury last week in I forgot where I was, all over the place. Yeah, Liverpool. Talking to Fury last week in Liverpool, he feels that the AJ fight will happen at some point, even if they're both 50, and he was only being half. He was being half serious. I think AJ clearly believes there's a path to victory. The optics don't look good on paper. You know, dropped 4 times and knocked out in the 5th of those and dominated comfortably, and so. That doesn't look good, but AJ believes it, and if his corner and the people around him believe in him, then I think they'll get it. And will he have a rematch? I think he might. I think there might be a rematch straight away.
His Excellency wants that next.
Oh, yeah, and he wants it, and that means there's some money floating around. And also, you can't see in the old days, Dubois will fight someone you've barely heard of in his first defence in front of 3,000 people, the old Herbie Hyde style stuff. Those days are gone. Yeah. Now they may come back in 10 years, but right now they're gone.
In the peaks, they're gone. Yeah.
They're gone. You know, Dubois either fights, Usyk in a rematch, or Fury in a fight out of the blue, or AJ. I mean, who else is there? Joe Parker, maybe. Dillian White,
Wilder,
if Dillian becomes a baddie. A Wilder. I mean, who knows? But so basically, the AJ's, if it's not number one, it's joint first.
We spoke at the start of the interview about fights that have escaped us over the years. Yeah. If Fury AJ was to escape us because of, Fury came out and obviously said, AJ could lose 20 times, but it's obviously then not what it is to the fan. Absolutely. We'll all still buy it, we'll all still be there. Yeah. But it would be such a shame, right? It would be one of those fights that we talk about.
I mean, all Fury jokes aside, I think AJ and Fury has to happen by about September next year. And
even if AJ's off the back of 2 defeats?
If AJ's off the back of 2 defeats, I think there's a problem. If AJ's off the back of 1 defeat and then a sensational turnaround,
then it's a different story.
Then it's a different story. Yeah. Then he might have to have a 3rd fight with Dubois anyway. Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the things that the Riyadh season has done, is it's allowed us all to dream about these lunatic case scenarios. Crazy, I bring it to your attention. 3 years and 3 months. You know what's significant about 3 years and 3 months? That's the time Deontay Wilder and AJ shared being world heavyweight champion. 3 years and 3 months. Go figure. That is never going to happen under this Saudi revolution. Even if it's a year. 3 years and 3 months, the sides failed to agree terms, and that wasn't when they were rivals. That was when they were world champions, Charlie. That's a disgrace. We should all in the business hang our head in shame for not somehow making that fight happen. Wilder and AJ, 3 years, 3 months.
I suppose the times that we're in now, and look, we're able to see fights because financially it was able to be made. But back then, I suppose they just couldn't agree on finances. We saw the back and forth many a time.
Well, listen, everyone said they had agreed, and they all blamed the other person for pulling out, and that's what happens.
That sounds about boxing,
yeah,
doesn't it?
That's straightforward. But the bottom line is, once the money's on the table, Beterbiev and Bivol in the ring. Once the money on the tables, this is happening. Once the money's on the table, this is happening. That's just the way it works. You know, we got Fury and Usyk. It was on and off a dozen times, and then it was made. Fury and AJ, we could have had. You know, AJ beats Usyk in the rematch, then we've already had Fury and AJ.
What did you make of Tyson Fury's, I know he did interviews as such, but he came out on social media and said Usyk should have killed me, should have knocked me out.
Well, I think he's right. I mean, Usyk, in theory, should have finished him in the 10th, but Usyk probably knew that he didn't need to because he could win a couple of those last rounds and the fight was his. And at the same time, Tyson Fury, who's talked non-stop about what he's going to do in the next fight, the obvious part of that is, well, he didn't do it in the first fight. You know, I think Tyson's also said in various interviews that he thought he won it comfortably, or it was the easiest fight of his career. He said things like this, which is all great. It all helps towards the sell.
Tyson.
You saw Tyson, I saw Tyson in Liverpool last Saturday with Nick Ball fought, and he looked to me like he was 10 days away from a fight.
Okay.
10 days away from a fight, and that was enough for me.
No, very lastly,
Go on,
sorry.
son.
We talk about the boxing industry changing. You would have covered countless shows over the last sort of 10 years or so. I want to go on even further, but I want to talk about sort of promoters, etc. We now see Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn work together. Obviously, there's still a bit of a drift with Ben Shalom, but ultimately they're all pulling together and working. Yeah. Is it weird watching that unravel, given that, you know, they'd not even fucking seen each other before?
Yeah, I still find it odd. And I find it really refreshing. Not that it's ever happened in the past. All rivals have hated each other in the past. But what we're seeing here with the influx of the Saudi money and with these guys all working together, we're just seeing some of the greatest nights. You know, I've never lived in the past. I might have been there in the mid-80s onwards earning a living, but I'd never lived in the past, and you can't live in the past. Some of the fights then were legendary. They're never going to be forgotten. Some of them weren't. But what we're producing here, you know, if you look at every single fight that's been on the Riyadh season since October 2023, it's a staggering list. You know, you struggle to just make a top 10 great fights. So you know, you've almost got to make a list of 20 unbelievable fights, and I defy anybody.
There we are.
So if you look at all the fights that have taken part and all of the Riyadh season fights so far, the ones in Riyadh, LA and London, I defy anybody to come up with a top 10. I defy anybody to come up with a top 20. And I tell you what, I really defy anybody to come up with a definitive number 1 fight or a definitive number 2 fight. Because if you say one fight, I'll give you my reason why I don't think that's number 1. And if I say number 1, other people will give me their reason why they don't think it's number 1. I mean, and that's unbelievable. And these fights,
that's what boxing
these fights are incredible. I mean, even things like David Adelaide and Fabio Wardley. You know, a fight like that, which you maybe wouldn't consider, when you look at it again, you're thinking that was watched through your fingers raw, and that wouldn't have even made most people's top 10.
Like you say, money ultimately can bring people together, but it can also encourage relationships that people didn't know they had. And Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn seem to actually be very amicable around each other and enjoy each other's company.
Well, I think they're doing good business. Their fighters are doing good business. They're both big enough boys. They've both had wins and losses in their careers before they started working together. And long may they continue to work together. I mean, not being funny, I don't want to go back to the old days again. I don't want to go. But what was that? Was it last year when we had the 3 world title fights on one Saturday on 3 channels?
Yeah.
What's going on?
John Ryder for
Michael Conlon.
Oh,
lost
yeah.
the world title fight
And
in
then what was
Ireland.
in Manchester?
Chris Billam-Smith was somewhere, and
Again,
Lee Wood was somewhere
Lee Wood
else.
was up again,
Unbelievable. So DAZN, BT as it was
Broadcasters
then.
are working together, yeah.
Well, the broadcast got to work together, yeah. You know, there's only so much can go around.
Yeah.
You know, if let's put it this way, if TNT and Sky with their football coverage, they wouldn't put matches on at both at the same time, would they?
Very true.
And it should be the same
Bunce,
with boxing.
You're a bloody legend. Thank you very much.
Top
for your
man,
time,
Charlie.